I thought my best friend was having an affair with his dad's new girlfriend until I found out I was wrong in the most embarrassing way possible. But then, a few weeks later, Gott was pregnant and he was crying alone inside his home about not being ready. I was sitting beside my friend when he was stalking his dad's girlfriend on Instagram. We were 15 at the time and he was joking about how she was his sugar mommy, except it wasn't really a joke. Every day he came into school completely dripped out in Balenciaga, Versace, Moncler, and whenever we went shopping together, he'd ask her for money to buy me something too. Her Instagram was what you'd expect. Photos of her dog lying in the sun, mirror selfies, photos of her food. I joked that he should introduce me to her, and the following weekend I found myself at their house enjoying a barbecue together. The first thing she said to me was, "You two are an overload of good genes. Lucky me." I glanced over to my friend Oscar, expecting him to look as uncomfortable as me, but instead he smirked, and I even saw his cheeks blush. Alarm bells went off in my head, but I brushed them aside thinking that it was my fault for having such a dirty mind. But the worst part was that when his dad came out, she would completely change. She'd go from being glued to Oscar to practically ignoring him, and as soon as his dad walked back into the house, she would turn hard-eyed like a girl in an anime show. But it wasn't until a few weeks later when she hosted a pool party that my worst thoughts were confirmed. I invited my older brother Alex to the party to get a second opinion. She kept playfully tugging at Oscar's swim trunks, teasingly saying they needed to be adjusted. As soon as me and Alex were alone, he shook his head. "I think you're overreacting. Women show love more through touch and verbal affection, so I think she's just trying to build a relationship with her stepson-to-be." I didn't believe him, but I desperately wanted to. So much so that I turned a blind eye to things that were worthy of having CPS called. Rubbing sunscreen on her thighs, sitting extremely close together, kissing his neck. Like, what in the skibbity toilet? And that night, while I lay awake in bed at 3 a.m., I heard some weird sounds coming from his bedroom, as well as a woman's voice, one that sounded like his dad's girlfriend. I didn't even think twice about privacy, just barged right in. They were sitting on his bed side by side, and she was helping him with last-minute math homework. I laughed out of relief. "What's wrong? Why do you look so freaked out?" Oscar asked, laughing even harder than me. "You didn't think?" his mom asked. "Well, I don't know. What was I supposed to think?" I blurted out. The air in the room was lighthearted. I figured my brother was right, and I should probably stop watching so much corn. From that point, Oscar kept coming to school with new clothes, and sometimes we even laughed about how twisted I had made things in my head. I followed his dad's girlfriend on Instagram too, and he upgraded from best friend to family. We were eating lunch together when I joked about how his dad's girlfriend would have cooked a better meal. I laughed, and he laughed too. Except, it was one of those laughs that were a little too hard. "Yeah, that woman can do anything." He said this while licking his lips and smirking. My mouth opened in shock, and the alarm bells that I had tried to ignore came flooding back all at once. Suddenly, he completely changed the topic to Jason Tatum being a better player than LeBron James, so my attention was immediately shifted, and I never thought about it again, until a few months later, that is, because that's when his dad's girlfriend posted a pregnancy announcement on her Instagram. I thought it was weird since his dad was 55, and I didn't even think his swimmers were still intact. So the next day, I brought it up to Oscar, thinking that we could gossip about it for a little while. Instead, his face went red, but it wasn't embarrassing. It was anger. "I don't want to talk about it," he said, before grabbing his tray and moving to another table. We had eaten lunch together every day since 9th grade. I wanted to talk to him about it, but the next day, he didn't come into school, and a week later, the guidance counselor told me he had dropped out because of mental health issues. Well, to me, that simply wasn't good enough. So I went to house at a time when I knew his dad and his girlfriend would be working. I got my big brother to knock on the door, because I knew there was no way he'd open the door if he saw my face. He didn't answer, and when I turned the knob, the door was unlocked, so I just walked right in. I found him straight away. He was sitting on the couch in the living room, with his head buried in his hands. His body was convulsing like he was crying. I immediately ran over to him and put my arm around his shoulder. "I really effed up," he kept repeating, over and over again. I looked at him with extreme concern in my eyes, and with just 5 words, my life was flipped upside down. "I'm gonna be a father," he whispered. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. The room started spinning. Oscar, my best friend since forever, was going to be a dad at 16, and I knew exactly who the mother was. "Is it?" I couldn't even finish the question. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "She said she loved me. That age is just a number, that we were meant to be together." I sat there in complete shock, trying to process what he was telling me. All those moments I'd brushed off as my imagination suddenly made horrible sense. The expensive gifts, the touches, the way she changed when his dad was around. "What are you going to do?" I finally managed to ask. "I don't know," he sobbed. "She says we'll run away together after the baby comes, that she'll leave my dad and we can be a family." My blood ran cold. This woman had been grooming my best friend right under everyone's noses, including mine, and now she was pregnant with his child. "Oscar, you know this isn't right," I said carefully. "She's an adult. You're 16th. This is illegal. You don't understand," he shouted, suddenly defensive. "She loves me, and I love her." That's when I realized how deep this went. She hadn't just manipulated his body, she'd manipulated his mind too. He actually believed they were in some kind of star-crossed romance, not an abusive situation. "Does your dad know?" I asked. Oscar shook his head. She told him it's his. He was surprised, but happy. He doesn't suspect anything. I felt sick to my stomach. This was so much worse than I'd imagined, and I had no idea what to do next. I sat there next to Oscar, completely stunned. My best friend was going to be a father at 16, and the mother was his dad's girlfriend. I couldn't even wrap my head around it. "You can't tell anyone." Oscar grabbed my arm, his eyes wild with panic. "Promise me you won't tell anyone." I promised him I wouldn't, but inside my head was spinning. This wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. This woman had been manipulating and abusing my best friend, and now she was pregnant with his child. But what could I do? If I told someone, Oscar might hate me forever. If I didn't, this situation would only get worse. "I need some time time to think, I told him, getting up from the couch. But I'm here for you, man. No matter what. He nodded, wiping his tears away. Thanks. I knew I could count on you. I left his house feeling like I was carrying the weight of the world. Should I tell my parents? The police? Oscar's dad? Every option seemed terrible. I decided to start small. I'd document everything I remembered about their interactions. Maybe having it all written down would help me figure out what to do next. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the signs I'd missed or ignored, the expensive gifts, the way she touched him, the comments that made me uncomfortable. I started a note on my phone, writing down every interaction I could remember between Oscar and his dad's girlfriend. Dates, times, what was said, who was there. It wasn't much, but it was something. The next day at school was weird without Oscar. People kept asking where he was, and I just repeated what the guidance counselor had said, mental health issues. It wasn't exactly a lie. After school, I decided to check Oscar's social media accounts to see if there were any clues or evidence there. His Instagram was full of photos of his expensive clothes and shoes, but nothing directly linking him to his dad's girlfriend. Then I checked her account again. She had posted a new story, a sonogram picture with the caption, "Can't wait to meet you, little one." The comments were full of congratulations, with people assuming it was Oscar's dad's baby. It made me sick. I took screenshots of everything, adding them to my growing collection of evidence. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it yet, but it felt better than doing nothing. A week passed, and I tried to visit Oscar again. This time, his dad's girlfriend answered the door. She smiled sweetly, but her eyes were cold. "Oh, it's you," she said. "Oscar's not feeling well today. Maybe try again another time?" Before she could close the door, I caught a glimpse of Oscar in the background. He looked pale and thin, like he hadn't been sleeping or eating properly. He saw me too, but quickly disappeared into another room. "Actually, I really need to talk to him about a school project," I lied. "It'll only take a minute." Her smile tightened. "Like I said, he's not feeling well. I'll tell him you stopped by." The door closed in my face. I stood there for a moment, stunned. She was isolating him, cutting him off from his friends, from me. This was bad. I tried texting Oscar later that day. "Hey man, stop by earlier. Your dad's girlfriend wouldn't let me see you. Everything okay?" Hours passed with no response. I was getting worried. Finally, around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Oscar. She checks my phone. "Don't text anything about her or the baby. She says I can't hang out with you anymore. You're a bad influence." My heart sank. She was turning him against me now. I needed help, but I wasn't sure who to turn to. My brother Alex had already dismissed my concerns once. My parents would freak out. Oscar's dad was clueless. I decided to try my brother again. Maybe if I explained everything clearly, he'd believe me this time. "Alex, I need to talk to you about something serious," I said, knocking on his bedroom door that night. He was sitting at his desk, working on college applications. "What's up, little bro?" I told him everything, about the pregnancy, about Oscar's confession, about how his dad's girlfriend was now isolating him. Alex listened without interrupting, his expression growing more concerned with each detail. That's really messed up," he finally said. "If what you're saying is true, this woman belongs in jail." "So you believe me?" I asked, relieved. "I believe that you believe it," he said carefully. "But this is a serious accusation. We need more than just your word against hers." He was right, of course. It was my word against hers, and she was an adult who had already fooled Oscar's dad completely. I showed Alex my notes and screenshots, but even I had to admit it wasn't conclusive evidence of anything illegal. "Keep documenting everything," Alex advised, "and try to get Oscar to talk to a school counselor or someone. He needs professional help." The next day at school, I went to the guidance counselor's office. I didn't tell her everything, just that I was worried about Oscar and thought he might be in an unhealthy relationship with an older person. She thanked me for coming forward and said she'd look into it. A few days later, Oscar returned to school. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, clothes rumpled like he'd slept in them. When I tried to talk to him between classes, he just shook his head and walked away. At lunch, I sat down across from him anyway. He glanced around nervously, like he was afraid someone was watching. "She told me not to talk to you," he whispered. "Oscar, this isn't right," I said quietly. "What she's doing to you." "She loves me," he interrupted, but his voice lacked conviction. "And I'm going to be a father. I have to step up." "You're 16, I reminded him. "This isn't stepping up. This is being taken advantage of." His eyes flashed with anger. "You don't understand. No one does." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop filling Oscar's head with lies. He's happy with me. Back off, or you'll regret it." I showed Oscar the text. "Did you give her my number?" He looked away, ashamed. "She took it from my phone. I'm sorry." That text was the first direct threat, but it wouldn't be the last. Over the next few weeks, things escalated gradually. Vanessa, I learned her name was Vanessa, began methodically working to discredit me. She told Oscar's dad that I was a bad influence, that I was jealous of their family and trying to cause problems. Soon, I wasn't welcome at their house anymore. Then she started reaching out to parents she knew from school events, expressing concerns about my behavior around Oscar. Not everyone believed her, but enough did that I noticed some parents looking at me differently at basketball games. Some teachers even started watching me more closely after parent-teacher conferences. I was becoming increasingly isolated, much like Oscar. One day, I found a note in my locker. "I know what you're doing. Stop now, or I'll tell everyone you've been stalking me." I showed the note to Alex, who was now fully on my side. "She's trying to intimidate you," he said. "Classic abuser tactic. Isolate the victim and discredit anyone who might help them." Things got even worse when the guidance counselor called me into her office. Apparently, Vanessa had contacted the school administration, claiming I was harassing her and Oscar. The counselor looked at me with concern as she explained that Vanessa had shown them some text messages that seemed to support her claims. "I didn't send those texts," I protested. "She must have manipulated them somehow." The counselor sighed. "We take these allegations very seriously. For now, we're asking you to keep your distance from Oscar until we sort this out." I was being pushed further away from my best friend just when he needed me most. I felt helpless and angry. Vanessa was methodically cutting off Oscar's support system, and it was working. That night, I got a call from Oscar. He was whispering, obviously hiding from someone. "She's planning to leave town with me after the baby is born. torn, he said, his voice shaking. She says we're going to start a new life somewhere else, just the three of us. What about your dad? What about school? I asked. She says none of that matters, that we're soulmates. He paused. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. It was the first time he'd admitted he was afraid. That was progress. Oscar, you need to tell your dad the truth. I can't, he said. He'd call me. And what if they take my baby away? Before I could respond, I heard Vanessa's voice in the background. Oscar, who are you talking to? The call ended abruptly. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. The next day at school, Oscar avoided me completely. When I finally cornered him after last period, he looked terrified. She knows I called you, he whispered. She took my phone. She's watching me all the time now. Oscar, this is serious. She's isolating you, controlling you. That's what abusers do. His eyes welled up with tears. I know something's wrong, but I don't know how to get out. And the baby deserves better than this, I said gently. You both do. For a moment, I thought I was getting through to him. Then Vanessa's car pulled up outside the school. Oscar's face immediately shut down. I have to go, he said, backing away. Don't try to contact me again, please. I watched helplessly as he got into her car. She smiled at me through the window, a cold, triumphant smile that made my blood boil. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Oscar, trapped in that house with her. I decided I needed to try a different approach. If Oscar wouldn't help himself, maybe I could get through to his dad somehow. The next day was Saturday. I knew Oscar's dad usually played golf on Saturday mornings. I waited near their house until I saw him leave, then waited another hour to make sure Vanessa wouldn't be alone with Oscar. I knocked on the door, heart pounding. To my surprise, Oscar answered. He looked around nervously. She's in the shower, he whispered. You shouldn't be here. I needed to see if you're okay, I said. And to give you this, I handed him a burner phone I'd bought with my allowance money. Hide it somewhere she won't find it. Call me if you need help. He took the phone, hands shaking. Thanks, but I don't think— Oscar? Vanessa's voice called from upstairs. Who's at the door? Oscar's eyes widened in panic. He shoved the phone in his pocket and tried to close the door, but I held it open. It's just me, I called out. I was returning Oscar's textbook. Vanessa appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a bathrobe, her hair wet. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me. I thought I made it clear you weren't welcome here, she said coldly. I was just leaving, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I looked at Oscar one last time. Remember what I said about the history assignment? Chapter 16. He nodded slightly, understanding my message. There was no history assignment. I was telling him to call me. As I walked away, I heard Vanessa questioning Oscar about why I was really there. I hoped he could convince her it was innocent. That night, around 2 a.m., the burner phone rang. It was Oscar. She found the phone, he said, his voice barely audible. She was going through my room while I was sleeping. She's furious. My heart sank. Are you safe? Did she hurt you? No, but— he paused. She's saying if I ever try to contact you again, she'll tell my dad I've been stealing money from him to buy substances. She has fake texts and everything. Oscar, this is getting dangerous. You need to tell your dad the truth before she can spin more lies. I can't, he hissed. You don't understand. She's got something on me. Pictures, videos. She says she'll put them online if I tell anyone about us. My blood ran cold. This was even worse than I thought. She wasn't just manipulating him emotionally. She was blackmailing him with compromising material she'd collected. Where are you now? I asked. In the bathroom. She's right outside the door waiting. I have to go. Wait, I said quickly. My brother's friend Jordan works at the convenience store near your house. If you can get there somehow, tell him you need to talk to Alex's brother. He'll call me. Okay, Oscar whispered. I'll try. The line went dead. I lay awake the rest of the night, waiting for a call that never came. The next day was Sunday. I convinced Alex to drive me to the convenience store where his friend worked. We hung around for hours, buying slushies and candy we didn't want, waiting for Oscar to show up. He never did. Monday at school, Oscar was absent again. I tried texting his regular phone, but got no response. After school, I rode my bike past his house. His dad's car was in the driveway, but Vanessa's wasn't. I decided to take a chance. I knocked on the door, and to my relief, Oscar's dad answered. He looked tired and stressed. Oh, it's you, he said. Oscar's not feeling well today. Actually, sir, I was hoping I could talk to you, I said, my heart pounding. It's important. About Oscar. He hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. We sat in the living room, and I tried to figure out how to start this impossible conversation. Mr. Harris, I'm really worried about Oscar, I began. He hasn't been himself lately. He sighed. I know. Ever since Vanessa told us about the baby, he's been acting strange. I think he's having trouble accepting that he's going to have a little brother or sister. I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. Sir, I don't think that's why he's upset. I think there's something else going on. Before I could continue, the front door opened. Vanessa walked in, stopping short when she saw me. What is he doing here? She asked, her voice sharp. Oscar's dad looked confused. He was just checking on Oscar. What's the problem? Vanessa's face transformed into a mask of concern. Honey, I told you about the issues at school, how this boy has been spreading rumors and causing problems for Oscar. Mr. Harris frowned at me. Is that true? No, sir, I said firmly. That's not what's happening at all. Vanessa stepped closer, putting her hand on Mr. Harris's arm. I think it's best if he leaves. Oscar needs rest, not more stress. I could see Mr. Harris wavering, looking between us. Before he could decide, Oscar appeared at the top of the stairs. Dad, he called down, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in weeks. I need to talk to you about Vanessa. Vanessa's face went pale. Oscar, you should be in bed. You're not well. Oscar came down the stairs slowly, his eyes fixed on his father. I'm not sick, Dad. I never was. Mr. Harris looked confused. What's going on here? Oscar took a deep breath, glancing at me. I nodded encouragingly. The baby, he said quietly. It's not yours, Dad. It's mine. The room went completely silent. Mr. Harris stared at his son, then at Vanessa, his face uncomprehending. What are you talking about? He finally asked, his voice barely audible. He's confused, Vanessa said quickly. He's been having these delusions. I'm not delusional, Oscar shouted. Tell him the truth, Vanessa. Tell him how long it's been going on. Tell him about the gifts, the messages, everything. Mr. Harris turned to Vanessa, his face hardening. What is he talking about? Vanessa's demeanor changed, though not as dramatically as I expected. The sweet, concerned girlfriend faded, replaced by something more calculating. Oscar and I have a special connection, she said, her voice unnervingly calm. Something you wouldn't understand. Age is just a number. Mr. Harris stumbled backward like he'd been punched. He's 16, he whispered. He's a child. My child. He's mature beyond his years, Vanessa said, her tone defensive yet still controlled. We didn't plan for this to happen, but we care for each other. Mr. Harris looked like he might collapse. I moved to his side, helping him to the couch. Oscar stood frozen on the stairs, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, Dad, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. Vanessa's composure began to crack. Don't apologize, Oscar. We've done nothing wrong. Your father is just jealous because he couldn't satisfy me the way you do. The calculated cruelty of her words hung in the air. Mr. Harris looked up at her, his face twisted with disgust. This isn't love. This is abuse. You've been abusing my son. No one will believe that, Vanessa said, though her confidence was clearly shaken. Not when I tell them how Oscar pursued me, how he wouldn't take no for an answer. Texts you manipulated, I cut in. After you took his phone. She turned to me, eyes blazing. This is all because of you. You turned him against me. No, Oscar said, finding his voice again. He helped me see the truth. What you were doing to me wasn't right. It wasn't love. Vanessa's face contorted with anger. She moved toward Oscar, but Mr. Harris was faster. He stood up and blocked her path. Get out of my house, he said, his voice shaking with anger. Now, before I call the police. You wouldn't dare, she said. Not when I tell them what your son did to me. What you did to him, Mr. Harris corrected. He's a minor. You're an adult. There's only one criminal here, and it's you. For a moment, I thought she might attack him. Then, suddenly, all the fight seemed to drain out of her. She looked at Oscar one last time. You'll regret this, she said quietly, both of you. Then she grabbed her purse and walked out the door. We all stood in silence, listening to her car start up and drive away. Mr. Harris collapsed back onto the couch, his head in his hands. Oscar slowly came down the rest of the stairs and sat beside him. Dad, I'm so sorry, he whispered. I didn't know how to tell you. His dad looked up, his eyes red. How long? He asked. How long has this been going on? Oscar looked down at his hands. Almost a year. It started small, compliments, gifts, then more. Mr. Harris put his arm around his son's shoulders, pulling him close. This isn't your fault, he said firmly. None of this is your fault. I stood awkwardly by the door, feeling like I was intruding on a private moment. I should probably go, I said quietly. Oscar looked up at me, his eyes full of gratitude. Thank you, he said simply, for not giving up on me. Mr. Harris nodded. Yes, thank you, for being braver than all of us. As I walked home, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that Oscar had finally told the truth. Anger at Vanessa for what she'd done. Worry about what would happen next. The baby, the police, school. It was all so complicated. But for the first time in months, I felt hopeful. Oscar had taken the first step toward healing. He wasn't alone anymore, and neither was I. The next few weeks were absolute chaos. Mr. Harris called the police that same night, and I sat there with Oscar while he told them everything. The officers took detailed statements from all of us. One of them, a woman with kind eyes, told Oscar none of this was his fault. I could tell he didn't fully believe her yet. The cops took Vanessa's laptop and phone from the house as evidence. They found her at a hotel about 20 miles away and brought her in for questioning. I wasn't there for any of that part, obviously, but Oscar kept me updated through texts. School became a nightmare pretty quickly. Somehow word got out about what happened. Not the full story, but enough garbled details that everyone was talking. Oscar stopped coming to class again. I couldn't really blame him. The whispers and stares were brutal, and I was just the friend. I couldn't imagine what it would be like for him. Mr. Harris hired a therapist for Oscar, some specialist who dealt with abuse victims. Oscar texted me after his first session saying it was weird, but okay. I took that as a good sign. At least he was getting help from a professional who actually knew what they were doing. I went over to their house a lot during those first few weeks. Mr. Harris never seemed to mind. I think he was grateful Oscar had someone to talk to who wasn't an adult, asking him uncomfortable questions. We mostly just played video games and watched stupid YouTube videos, normal stuff that had nothing to do with Vanessa or the baby or any of it. Sometimes Oscar would get really quiet in the middle of a game, just staring at the screen without actually playing. I never pushed him to talk during those moments. I just waited until he came back from wherever his mind had gone. One night, about a month after everything blew up, Oscar finally opened up more about what had happened with Vanessa. We were sitting in his backyard, shooting hoops like we used to before all this started. She made me feel special at first, he said, bouncing the ball slowly, like I was more mature than other guys my age, more interesting. I just nodded, letting him talk. I knew it was wrong, he continued, but she kept saying age was just a number, that we had a connection that most people wouldn't understand. He missed a shot, and I grabbed the rebound. The worst part is I still miss her sometimes, he admitted quietly. How messed up is that? I passed him the ball. Your therapist probably has some fancy term for it. I think it's just because your brain got used to her being around. He nodded. Doctor, Melissa says it's normal, that it doesn't mean I want to go back to her. It's just, I guess. We played in silence for a while after that. I didn't know what else to say. What do you tell your best friend when he's going through something so completely messed up? There's no manual for this stuff. The legal process moved forward deliberately. Oscar had to give more statements. They took his phone as evidence too. The prosecutor met with him and his dad several times. I wasn't part of any of that, but Oscar would text me updates afterward. Vanessa was charged with multiple crimes related to sexual abuse of a minor and other related offenses. She initially maintained her innocence, trying to claim Oscar had pursued her, but the evidence from their phones and computers told a different story. The baby situation made everything even more complicated. Oscar was understandably anxious about becoming a father, but also worried about what would happen to his child. Mr. Harris was supportive, but obviously struggling too. How do you deal with your teenage son having a baby with the woman who abused him? There's no playbook for that. About 4 months after everything came out, Vanessa accepted a plea deal with the prosecutors. Oscar was relieved he wouldn't have to testify in court. The judge sentenced her to several years in prison, though the exact length would depend on various factors, including her behavior while incarcerated. Throughout this period, Oscar was coming to terms with the reality that he was going going to be a father. His therapist helped him work through his complex feelings about it. He decided he wanted to be involved in the baby's life, even though the circumstances were so deeply troubling. When the baby was born, Vanessa was already in prison. Her sister took temporary custody. Oscar went to see his daughter at the hospital with his dad. He sent me a picture, this tiny little thing with a tuft of dark hair like his. He named her Lily. The courts had to navigate complicated custody arrangements. Since Oscar was a minor, his dad had to be legally involved too. It was a complex process involving paperwork, hearings, and social worker visits. Eventually, they worked out a system where Lily would live primarily with Oscar and his dad, with Vanessa's sister having visitation rights as the baby's aunt. Oscar didn't come back to our school. He switched to online classes so he could be home with Lily. I visited them a couple times a week. It was strange seeing my best friend changing diapers and mixing formula, but he was surprisingly good at it. Mr. Harris helped a lot too, taking care of Lily when Oscar needed to study or just take a break. I never thought I'd be a grandpa at 56, he told me once while bouncing Lily on his knee. Definitely not like this, but she's innocent in all this. Not her fault how she came into the world. I had to respect him for that. A lot of people might have rejected the baby because of what Vanessa did, but he treated Lily like family from day one. The whole situation at school eventually calmed down as new gossip replaced the old. Some people still asked me about Oscar occasionally, but most had moved on to whatever drama was currently happening. I kept my head down and focused on basketball and classes. My brother Alex felt pretty bad about not believing me at first. He tried to make it up to me by driving me to Oscar's house whenever I wanted to visit, no questions asked. He even bought some baby clothes for Lily, which I thought was pretty cool of him. One day during spring break, about 6 months after everything happened, Oscar and I were hanging out in his room while Lily napped in her crib nearby. He seemed more like his old self than he had in a long time. My therapist says I'm making good progress, he told me, scrolling through his phone. Still got issues to work through, but who doesn't, right? I nodded, relieved to see him joking again, even if it was dark humor. You know what's weird? He continued. I'm actually kind of glad it all came out when it did. If you hadn't pushed me to tell the truth, I might have run away with her like she wanted. I shrugged. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe, he said. Or maybe I would have been stuck in that situation for years. Who knows? Lily made a little noise from her crib, and Oscar immediately went to check on her. It still amazed me how quickly he'd adapted to being a dad, despite everything. She looks like you, I said, peering at the baby's sleeping face. Poor kid, Oscar joked, but I could hear the pride in his voice. As we headed downstairs to grab some snacks, Oscar stopped me in the hallway. Hey, I never properly thanked you, he said seriously, for not giving up on me, for seeing what was happening when I couldn't. I felt awkward with the sudden emotion. That's what friends are for, right? You'd have done the same for me. Yeah, but still, thanks. We did our old secret handshake from middle school, something we hadn't done in years, and then went to raid the kitchen like normal teenagers. The next school year, Oscar decided to come back to regular school for senior year. He said he was tired of being isolated at home, and his dad had arranged his work schedule so he could watch Lily during school hours. Oscar's first day back was weird. People stared and whispered, but most were surprisingly chill about it. I guess a summer had given everyone enough time to process the gossip. A few jerks made comments, but Oscar just ignored them. Doctor, Melissa says I shouldn't let other people's opinions define my recovery, he told me at lunch. Besides, they don't know the whole story. I was impressed by how much more confident he seemed. The therapy was clearly helping. We fell back into our old routines pretty quickly, eating lunch together, playing basketball after school, working on assignments. The only difference was that now we did a lot of hanging out at his house so he could be with Lily. I got used to doing homework while a baby crawled around the living room. Sometimes I'd watch her while Oscar took a shower or made dinner. She was a pretty cool kid, always smiling and trying to grab my phone. As for Vanessa, she was completely out of the picture. She gave up all parental rights as part of her plea deal. Oscar said it was better that way. He didn't want Lily visiting her mom in prison or having to explain that whole situation when she got older. I'll tell her the truth someday, he said once while feeding Lily her bottle. When she's old enough to understand. Dr. Melissa is helping me figure out how to do that. By the time graduation rolled around, things felt almost normal again. Oscar was doing well in school, despite having a 1-year-old at home. He'd even started dating a girl in our chemistry class. Nothing serious, just normal teenage stuff that he'd missed out on before. Mr. Harris brought Lily to our graduation ceremony. She wore this tiny cap that matched ours, which was pretty adorable. Oscar's face lit up when he saw them in the audience. After the ceremony, we all went out for dinner. My family, Oscar's family, and a few other friends. Watching Oscar balance Lily on his knee while trying to eat his burger, I thought about how far we'd come from that day. I found him crying on his couch. That summer before college was busy for both of us. I was heading to State University on a basketball scholarship. Oscar had decided to go to community college so he could live at home with Lily and his dad. He planned to transfer to a 4-year school eventually. The night before I left for college, we had one last hangout at his place. Lily was already asleep, so we played video games with the volume low, just like old times. You know what's crazy? Oscar said during a break between games. If none of this had happened with Vanessa, I probably would have ended up at State with you. Different timeline, I guess. I nodded. Yeah, but then you wouldn't have Lily. He glanced toward her room. True. And despite everything, I can't imagine life without her now. We stayed up way too late, talking about everything and nothing. College plans, basketball, new games coming out, old memories from before all the drama, just normal stuff. When I finally got up to leave, Oscar walked me to the door. This isn't goodbye, you know, he said. You'll be back for breaks and stuff, and you can FaceTime Lily so she doesn't forget her uncle. I laughed. Like I'd let her forget me. I'm the cool one who's gonna teach her all the bad habits. We did our handshake one more time, and I headed home, thinking about how life takes these weird turns you never expect. 2 years ago, we were just normal high school kids with normal problems. Now everything was different. But as I walked home under the streetlights, I realized that despite all the awful stuff that had happened, some good had come out of it too. Oscar was stronger now. He had Lily. He had a better relationship with his his dad, and our friendship had survived the worst test imaginable. I wasn't naive enough to think everything would be perfect going forward. Oscar still had plenty of healing to do. Raising Lily wouldn't be easy. College would change things between us, at least a little bit. But for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like we were both going to be okay.